Hello, everyone. This is Dennis Geryl. I'm starting the show for Mr. Nighthawk this morning. I'm going to finish reading this here, and we'll begin with a little Saturday morning Paranormal Brew here, okay? Copyright disclaimers. This channel may use some copyright materials without specific authorization of the owner, but contents here used here falls under the fair use. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1776. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is the use permitted by copyright statute that may otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit educational personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. And there you have it. Come on in, Geryl.
Good morning.
There's the Grandmaster G. Welcome in, son. All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to get the comments up here, and I guess we'll do the little ticker here. I'll start the ticker up here. I don't know. It might be my ticker that's going up here. Wait a minute. Hold on a minute. No, I'll do that. Get the rabbit hole thing up here. No, that's not it. Girl, can you bring his ticker up here?
You want me to do it?
Yeah. I can't find it for some reason. I don't know. I'm getting comments up there.
All right.
Get the comments going. Yeah, there we go. I got the comments up. If you can get the ticker going, we'll be okay.
All right. You go ahead and talk to everybody, and I'll do that.
All right, and good morning, everybody. We're running a little ragged this morning here. We're filling in for Mr. Nighthawk. He's having some technical problems, but he says he's going to try to come in later on. Gonna say good morning to everybody. Good morning, Aussie Sue, Cynthia and Gary, Cynthia Prince, Gemini. NO's here. We're getting the full house in here this morning, I think. Come on in, everybody. Come on in. Sit down a spell. We're gonna have some interesting talk going on here today on the Saturday morning Paranormal Brew. Good morning, Aussie Sue. And today's topic is going to be haunted roads and haunted railroads. So we're going to get into that in a few minutes here. Have you got any announcements you would like to make, Geryl, while we're on?
We just have our shows coming up tonight. Actually, it'll be late, 10 p.m. Central. I'm going to be on Terrence B's Truth Seekers from Australia. And then Sunday at 6 p.m., we're going to have George Mitrovic. He's a pretty well-known author, just like you, Dennis. He has 150 books on Amazon on cryptids and all kinds of weird and high strangeness.
Oh, he's a very prolific writer then. Yeah, that sounds good. I would look forward to watching that, definitely. Of course, I've got coming up Demonology Today tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, and we're going to have an open mic night. We're going to have all questions and everything. So anybody wants to come and join in, we're going to have questions and observations going on. So it's going to be open up. I always love those kind of conversations, see what everybody's coming up with, you know. That used to be a thing I used to do in my lectures. I always had a little question and answer thing at the end. I always enjoy that. It's good feedback. When you can touch your audience and get back and forth with the audience, you're doing good, you know.
Yep.
Anytime. But we got some comments moving in here.
I've been putting them. I'll just go
Um,
ahead and keep putting them up on screen as we talk.
that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, we're going to talk about a little bit about haunted roads and railways, railroads. There's a lot of ghost stories and paranormal stories told about railroads and roads and all that. Actually, I investigated. It's not too far from where I'm at right now. It's supposed to be one of the most haunted roads in America, and its name is Onyx Road. That's very
Oh,
interesting. Onyx, an onyx, usually a black stone. And it's supposed to be very haunted. It has an old cemetery on the off side of the road. I mean, this cemetery was so old it was almost completely gone. I mean, I found some headstones and all that. But I mostly talked to a lot of the residents along this rural road. It's not a city street or anything like that. It's kind of a rural road. And I talked to a lot of residents along there, Geryl, and everybody had a doggone story about this road. I mean, they had things occurring in their houses or on their yard or seeing things out in their yards. And there was a lot of paranormal activity supposed to be situated around this road. Also, and here's one freaky thing, and I'll hand it over to you for a minute. But the one freaky thing about this road, there was a big forest on one side of it, and I went off. I went in, me. I'll trek off into the forest there. So I went off in the woods there, looking around, and I actually came upon a ritual site.
oh,
Yeah, and I could tell definitely without doubt it was a ritual site, and I could feel like I was being watched while I was there because they do watch over these sites very closely. So I've always warned people if you ever come up on one, your best bet is just to get the heck out of Dodge there. Get on out of there and don't hang around. But I was actually with another guy, and we came upon this ritual spot, and they had evidently looked like the remains of a deer or a small calf or something like that were in this fire. I don't know what type of a sacrificial thing went on or whatever, but I said that might have attributed to a lot of the activity along that road, if that is such a thing going on there. We've talked about that before about opening spiritual doorways and stuff like that. When you perform these rituals, you got to understand it's the law of the universe, cause and effect. Whenever you do something, you're going to get something back, whatever it may be, whether it's good or bad. And a lot of people don't realize when you do these things, you open up that proverbial can of worms. It's hard to get the lid back on it sometimes, and you might be sorry you left that lid off if you don't. And I had a lot of people tell me about that with Ouija boards. They'll open a Ouija board session, do their stuff, and then they fail to close it, and then they have all kinds of weird paranormal activity and all that go on. And you have to be very careful. You have to open and close a session. That's very important in that respect. Although I don't do Ouija board stuff, I wouldn't have one in my house. I think they're very dangerous to mess around with. And you got to be very careful with other things of divinity too, like tarot cards, I Ching sticks, or whatever the situation is. Be very careful what you're doing because there will be an effect from it, one way or another, usually. Um, I've had people say, "Oh, nothing happened," and then like maybe 2 or 3 days later, weird things go on. It may be very slow in opening or whatever. It doesn't just like a flipping a switch. All of a
right.
sudden something happens. So people need to realize that. But anyway, I think a lot of these locations and areas, Gerald, is what I'm getting to. Long about way getting there, but what I'm getting to is a lot of these areas may have certain attributes like that, especially roads, railroads, and all that, where people have messed around ritualistically and opened the doorways and done some things that cause this haunting. Um, and here's an interesting thing. I was gonna put this up on Facebook the other day. A lot of times, it's not the places that are haunted. It's the people that are haunted in these places. But it can be the other way around too. If the place is haunted, then people in it can be haunted by the very place itself, the location. So it's interesting what can go on in a lot of these locations. And I've done a lot of locations through the years. I find it very interesting. One of my favorite investigations is to do locations. You find out a lot of stuff, and you have a lot of hot activity sometimes in places like that. But still, anyway, I think a lot of these roads, and especially like railroads, we've had a lot of bad accidents on railroads and roads. So they are a place of trauma, death, painful stuff going on here. And we've all seen and it's the very sad signs of crosses that people put up on the sides of roads where there have been accidents, people have lost their lives and all that. Even some states now actually mark the pavement with a cross where these accidents happen. Uh, so you've got a lot of trauma on the roads and the railways, without a doubt. What do you think?
Yeah, so ever since we've started the highway system, whether it was for the war efforts, when that all became, there's always been deaths associated with even the building of the roads. And then before
Uh,
that, you had the country roads that's always been there, that everybody uses, and there's always been accidents or deaths or murders, along the highways and byways. So you got to look at that also.
yeah, definitely. And there were definitely, and I've had a lot of stories told to me about by truckers. And truckers, they stay on the road constantly. That's where they live most of the time. Well, they've had a lot of paranormal experiences. I had a truck driver tell me about there was, I think, a certain road in Louisiana or Texas or Texarkana back down in there somewhere where they dreaded to drive down this highway because I think it was a rather deep curve there. And when they would slow down and go around this curve, they said this woman would jump on the side up on the running board of their cab, and this young girl, and she would try to get in their truck, and she's actually not in this world. She's not a real person. But she was supposedly her story is that she was like, I don't know if this was like back in the '60s when people used to do a lot of hitchhiking and stuff like that. That she was actually hit and killed. She was a hitchhiker and was hit and killed on this curve by somebody, and she's still like trying to catch a ride to go home. She's still hitchhiking. And she'll jump up on the running boards and stuff of these, and it scares them. They don't want to slow down there around that curve, you know, because they run a possibility of her jumping on the cab. That's very interesting. So you have a lot of ghost stories like that on the roads and the railways, and we have one famous one here in the state of South Carolina that's called the Mako Light, and it's supposed to be the ghost of a man named Joe Baldwin, who was a brakeman on the railroad, and he was actually accidentally decapitated by two train cars or whatever the situation was. But his job was, of course, back in the old days, to carry a signal lantern and signal the trains, on the different tracks. And then they say his ghost can still be seen carrying that lantern, and all you see now is the Mako light. And I've actually investigated that. I didn't get to see the Mako light. And actually, that part of that railroad is pretty well gone now. I mean, all that's changed a lot. If I could have gone maybe about 30 or 40 years ago, I might would have got a better chance at it. But some people to this day still swear they see it crossing the road there and all that light. I've read a lot of accounts, and there are some actual. If anybody listening wants to look it up, there are actual photographs of this light online, I think, and on YouTube and stuff like that. But it's called the Mako light. That's Macco, I believe is how you spell that. It's a very famous ghost light, and there are a lot of ghost lights connected to roads and railways. That's an interesting aspect too.
Yep. There's all the regions here in the US and all over the world, everybody has their highways and byways stories, whether it's, the lady in white or the bride, that's hitching a ride, or somebody the young girl usually hitching a ride, and they end up taking them wherever they're going. And it's just
Uh-huh.
like somebody's just sitting right there next to you, like it's a full body apparition, and they drop them off, and it's the entrance to the cemetery, and they just walk in and disappear. There's all kinds of stories like that across the whole
Uh-huh.
US and probably everywhere.
That is, Geryl, the most famous ghost story in the whole world. Wherever you go in the whole, I'm talking about the entire world, you will find a story equivalent to the ghostly hitchhiker. Wherever you go, in almost every town. There's one nearby where I'm at right now, but it doesn't happen to be a young lady, although most of the time it is. This one is a guy in a yellow rain slicker that died in an airplane crash, and that I think, is only seen on rainy days or something, trying to catch a ride along this stretch of road where the plane crashed nearby, and he's still wearing a yellow rain slicker and all that. Um, so you've got some interesting stories like that, but that is the most famous ghost story of all, the ghostly hitchhiker. No matter where you go in the world, you'll run into that story. And people who have studied folklore have studied the phenomena of this story and how it must have got spread around the world. And by the way, it predates highway systems. That's how far back it goes. Actually, I can think of one right off the story of Peter Rugg. Now, Peter Rugg was back in the horse and buggy days, okay? And Peter Rugg was supposed to, I forget now, he was a salesman or something like that. But he swore that, I think this is up in Pennsylvania, is where this supposedly began. He swore that he was going to go from point A to point B that day. And this bad storm, he said, I'll get there whether I have to, deal with the devil or not. So he got in his horse and buggy and took off and disappeared into the storm, never to be seen again. But on dark, stormy nights, people hear this buggy and horses going by, and they say, "Oh, that's Peter Rugg," still trying to get home. So you got. I mean, this goes way back. It probably, if we look, we might find it in Roman times. Definitely in medieval times. That there's an equivalent to this story. It's a very famous ghost story, but it's very interesting when you go into folklore and stuff like that to try to study the origins and how this stuff gets started and where it started. That's like the Crybaby Bridge thing, okay? Almost every town's got a Crybaby Bridge. I've
Right.
got one here in this town. There's one here in this town. And I've investigated. I'm taking pictures. It is an eerie looking little bridge, but it's where it's at, more or less what it is. But the story attached to it, but this bridge supposedly was taken from down in Charleston, South Carolina, and brought upstate here and reassembled. But the story supposedly came with it. But that I found just in the local vicinity nearby, in the state alone, there's like 5 or 6 crybaby bridges. Okay, so which one you want to pick to go with it? So I don't know. You probably got some up that way. I'm sure.
Yeah, they don't really call them Crybaby Bridge, but there is bridges here. The same story. Where
Mhm,
you hear the people. And if you get out of your
mhm,
car, you can
mhm,
yeah, the lights will start flashing, and the horn will go off, or you'll find fingerprints on the bumpers, like somebody's pushing you up the road. I mean, there's just all
yeah.
variations of that same story.
Another interesting aspect of these things, Gerald, and bridges are another definitely a haunted area. And crossroads, we all know about crossroads. The interesting thing about, I think, all of this, from a folklore wise and a scholarly way to look at it, there are certain areas in the world that are transitional areas. You go from one place to another, like over a bridge or a roadway, or crossroads as you come to a decision to go which way you're going to go and all that. All these places symbolize, and mountaintops too, by the way, symbolize a crossing over. From point A to point B. It's a crossing area. So it would definitely have some mystical stories attached to it. It would be a definite hotspot for haunting. And now the interesting thing about Crossroads, yeah, I've heard about that, Chad, definitely, and Antietam. There's a place supposedly in Texas where little kids push you across the railroad crossing so the train won't hit you because they were all killed in a bus or something like that. Anyway, the interesting thing about these places, from a scholarly point of view, is that um, the very life that these things take on, the legend that comes alive and it gets passed down from generation to generation, person to person. Um, a lot of these things I've traced down, these legends, and I'm kind of a legend hunter. I love to chase after legends. Turn out to be nothing more than just stories. That's all. But a lot of legends have a kernel of truth to them somewhere, and that's what you're looking for. And the interesting thing about a lot of these
These
roads, like
roads,
you
and
mentioned
like
there, the
you mentioned
battlefields are
there, the
saying,
battlefields are saying,
"Hey, come on
"Hey,
in, sir."
come on in."
Yeah, yeah.
That's your echo, Dennis. He's got the volume on where you can hear your echo.
Oh, I don't know what would be echoing off here.
No, not you. I think William had his volume turned up or
Oh,
something.
oh,
You can hear
oh.
your
Uh, Come on, talk a little bit, and we'll see if you're still echoing.
Come on, talk a little bit, and we'll see if you still echoing.
Yeah, still echoing. Yeah,
Yeah.
very distorted too. Kind of a
Very
distortion
distorted
with it.
too. Kind of a distortion with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I don't know what's going
Yeah.
on. It seemed like he was
Yeah.
echoing.
There's some definite problems. Anyway, from a scholarly point of view, these roads, this whole thing, this transitioning point, is what's interesting about the paranormal aspects. It's just like battlefields, hospitals. I told you the stories a lot about. I've worked at a hospital. I worked at a hospital for about 30 years, and that's one of the most haunted places you can go around. Okay, hospitals are hotbeds for this stuff. Um, I've even investigated one time. I investigated a haunted ambulance, kind of a situation where actually the ambulance drivers came to me and said something freaky. And what it was, it wasn't a lot of people thought, oh, somebody died in the ambulance, still there. No, it wasn't that. It was actually one of the ambulance drivers died in a car wreck that had nothing to do with the ambulance. But he was like coming back because that was what the ambulance he worked on. He was coming back and like rearranging stuff, his own kind of system he had and their equipment. A lot of ambulances are like rolling hospitals. They have all kinds of little equipment, bandages, all kinds of stuff like that. And he was rearranging this stuff and with his own little system, like, and they freaked out the ambulance drivers. So I did a little thing to kind of, send him home, send him back to where he needed to go, and it's okay. He didn't have to come to work anymore. Kind of a situation. But you never know what you're gonna run into something like that. But like I say, yeah, funeral homes are very bad places of haunting. As a matter of fact, I saw one on they had on Foxy the other day. They were advertising this old funeral home for sale, but it came with something else too. It was supposedly haunted, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know if I would buy a funeral home to live in.
That's bad too. I tell you what. And you know what? Here's the interesting thing, girl. Whether it be a road or a house or a location, these things seem to remain behind. It's almost like it's a stain, a spiritual stain on these places. The memory gets embedded, I guess you might say, almost. The memory of trauma bad things that go on and happen there in places
That's the
like that.
thing. Even like the Civil War, whether it's residual hauntings or it's actual spirits that are coming, from the other side.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you
Uh-huh.
get all the deaths, like we're talking about funeral homes, car accidents, war zones, and the Civil War, all the battlefields. You have all that stuff going on.
Yeah, that's a hotbed, definitely. I mean, you're going to definitely have some kind of activity. And I've advised a lot of paranormal researchers and ghost hunters or whatever name you want to put on them. I like to call it spiritual research myself. But anyway, I've advised a lot of them go there. That's where you want to go if you're going to investigate something. That's where you definitely got a better chance at that than maybe even grandma's house. You know what I'm saying? Go where there's been a lot of it, a lot of trauma. Here's the thing about it, okay? Just about everywhere we go, Geryl, somebody has died there. Whether it's a sidewalk or Walmart. And I even investigated a haunted Walmart one time, okay? Where the suicide took place in it. Anyway, wherever you go, somebody died. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be haunted, though. Death doesn't
Right.
necessarily precipitate a haunting, but a lot of precipitates a haunting is a traumatic death. That's kind of being ripped out of life, kind of a thing, It has to definitely cause some kind of psychic echoes. And I think that's what we're dealing with here psychic episode type things, the echoes of the psychic that would, as a parapsychologist, I've been interested in the aspects of the mind. A lot of what the mind does and how it interacts with what the spiritual aspects of the world around us and all that. And I think there is a definite action, and reaction with this stuff. Whether it's a trauma or whatever. If you are ripped out of life, so to speak, very quickly taken out, you can be confused. You could be taken unaware. You wouldn't know what was going on. You would still, or especially if you were involved in doing something at that time of death that was weighing on you very much emotionally. And we know how much emotional output has on us. And if there's something left undone or something very dramatic like a car crash, something like that, that would definitely lead up to these lingering psychic echoes, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it. Wasn't that long ago, that people had, their parlors, they're in their houses, where they'd keep the bodies on display, when they passed away. So most people passed away in their houses back in the day
Oh,
because they
yeah.
they either couldn't afford a hospital or there was no hospitals. So you had everybody
Hmm.
that had all the funeral and celebrations or rituals, if you want to call them rituals, in their houses.
Yeah, and there was a lot of superstition and folklore attached to that. Like I told you before about when somebody died, they covered all the mirrors because they were afraid that your spirit would become trapped in those mirrors and you would haunt that place forever. So you had a lot of superstitions like that attached to that death. By the way, why do we call? Here's an interesting thing, tidbit. Why do we call it the living room? Okay, that room in the house called the living room. They say one reason why we call it that is because people who, as they used to call this term, laying a corpse or were brought home, they were, you didn't have funeral homes back in the old days that much. The big cities had them, but the rural areas didn't have funeral homes that much. You would actually display the corpse in what was actually called the dead room. It was a foyer. They called it the dead room. That's one good room that you had where you displayed the body. And finally, at the turn of the century, when this became less vogue, they said, "Oh, let's get rid of that dead room thing. Let's call it the living room." And that's supposedly how that got started. Okay. Back in the old days, the living room that we call living room now was actually called what? The den. But that's
Yeah.
another story.
Yeah, we've had here we've had lived in with mom and dad's house growing up. We had the family room, the living room.
Uh-huh.
I mean, and my aunts and uncles, they still had what they considered a parlor.
Uh-huh. The
There's just
parlor,
all
yeah.
this depends on what generation you grew up and what terms they were using and what part of the U.S. you're in.
Uh. So, yeah, the mores have changed. Even when I was a very young child, and I talked about that episode before about the cats that showed up in my grandmother's. Um, my grandmother laid a corpse in a house. That's been a very, very long time ago. I was about 5 or 6 years old. I was probably about 6 years old, something like that, when that happened. So people don't bring that. They don't do that anymore. It's the funeral homes that do that now. And of course, even now, and that's the interesting thing about how these things change over time. Even now, funerals are becoming. Have you noticed this? They're becoming shorter and shorter, and there people are going more in for graveside services. You know, uh, and all that. So eventually that's going to change. There probably won't be funerals like we had once upon a time. And I've sat through a lot of long funerals. Okay. I mean, how many preachers do you need to tell everybody that you're dead and you're gone? Okay. Uh, but it can be redundant. Here's the bad thing about it. It kind of stretches and prolongs the sorrow out in a way. You know what I'm saying? Unnecessarily more painful than it should be. You know what I'm saying? For the
Yeah.
family. You know.
I mean, back, traditional, like you said, you had the viewing of the body, and usually it was in somebody's house or the parlor or the dead room, what you
Uh-huh.
called it. And,
Uh-huh.
there's even cultures today that still celebrate the dead, as
Uh-huh.
part of their calendar year. And the one that I remember is where they actually bring out their dead relatives out of their coffins, and they prop them up in everyday situations. They have them dressed up in clothes, and
Uh-huh.
it's just like they're talking to the dead. They have their body right there.
Well, there is in a lot of cultures worldwide, Geryl, there's that need for veneration of the ancestors, ancestral veneration. The Chinese are very strong about this, and of course, in certain parts of Mexico and Latin South America, you have the Day of the Dead kind of thing, and all this going on. And among a lot of the Catholic religions, there's a lot of veneration going. There's like I think one day where they pick out to go and clean the tombs up and paint them and do all these other things. It's almost as if you're trying to reconnect with the past, and your
Right.
ancestors, kind of a thing. Uh, the Vikings were all about that with the halls of Valhalla. That's where the halls of my fathers, as they said. That's where they wait for me, kind of a thing. So you have this in a lot of different cultures. This need to hook up with your ancestors, to remember the past, and that's good too. When you think about it, because when you die, Gerald, you and I, when we're dead for about 100 years, who's gonna remember us? Okay, who's gonna even know that? Might find an old picture of us one day. Who is that? Uh, that's where it's gonna go. No matter what. And I've had people tell me, "Oh, well, my kids, they'll bring flowers to my grave." Yeah, they may do that a while, but eventually life goes on. That's just
Yep.
that's just the natural order of things. But it's good that we remember. That we still have that little bit of a tie to the past. That's really good in a way that we venerate our ancestors who have passed beyond that veil, and hopefully they can maybe still there around spiritually to help us out when we need it. So there's nothing wrong, I don't think, with that. Looking at it that way. Of course, now you don't want to worship your ancestors. That would be bad because that's sort of messing things up spiritually. I don't think your ancestor would want you to worship them either, because they were just people like you and me.
Right.
They were just trying to get by too, with whatever the situation. But I'm sure they'd want to be remembered. we'd all like to be remembered, no matter what the situation is. But unfortunately, most of the time, we are forgotten.
Well, I like collecting old books, and I have several that are from my area or our area here where we live, and it goes by counties for us, and it has everybody listed in it and what was happening at the time. These are like 1800 books, 1900 early 1900s, and my great great grandfather was in a couple of these books for the counties where they go around the prominent people or businessmen, and they say, hey, for $1 or whatever, we're talking, $1 was worth a lot of money back in the 1800s or whatever, or late 1800s.
Hmm.
And so they'd have a biography of them and family history and their picture in them. And so I like I probably have 3 or 4 of them, and they have our family history, or at least my great grandfathers and their kids in it.
That's good, though. And here I love old pictures because that's the closest thing we have now to a time machine. You know, it really takes you back and puts you in a place there. I love old photos, definitely. And some of the interesting things about times past, you can learn things from that. You know, they still the past, the history still has a way to teach us these things, and it shouldn't be forgotten. I've often said as a writer, no story, no matter what it is, should ever be lost to history. And that's why I keep telling people, write it down, write it down. If you had some kind of experience, something you need to write it down, not just for the fact of a record, but other people in the future may be glad you wrote that down. You know, so
Right.
they could go back and read it. We shouldn't lose touch with that. Definitely, no matter what.
Well, that's
And
that's what
there's,
I was very
there's
grateful to find those books. It had my family in it. I was really
uh,
surprised. And now I have copies of my grandfather's great grandfathers. I actually have a picture of them now that I can look at, because we don't really have any physical pictures of them. And
uh,
they were just
well,
like those guys were just like traveling salesmen. They were like what
yeah,
we would have during the day, where they'd go door to door and sell encyclopedias. Well, these guys were selling,
yeah.
advertisements in these books. For $1
Uh,
or whatever it was back in the day. You could get your family history in there, and well, if you had the money, who wouldn't want to put your family history in a book?
Here's another thing: family history is a living thing, and when a family member passes away, a lot of history goes with them. That's a sad thing about it. And there's a lot of people I would love to that have gone on that I would love to talk to today and ask questions and know more about it. Luckily, I did that a little bit when I was a kid. I did ask a lot, but there's a whole lot more that I could have got into that I didn't. You don't have that frame of mind when you're doing it. But looking back now, I could regret that because there's a lot I would love to have asked my grandparents or my parents about things that went on or what happened and all that. Um, uh, some of the things that got passed down to me were family ghost stories, which that's was my expertise there. Okay, that was my number one thing to go after. And when I was a kid, Geryl, back in the old days, especially in the neighborhoods, people would sit around on their porches towards evening. I know you remember this,
Yep.
the old porch swings and all that. And as a kid, I'd go from porch to porch to porch, and I would get these people talking about their family ghost stories. I got them all up here somewhere. That was the number one thing, get them started on. And of course, here's the number one thing is, oh, well, I don't believe in that kind of stuff. But let me tell you what happened to Uncle Henry, that kind of a deal. And I was, as a young guy, I was recording all this. I try to keep it all in my mind. And but every family had its own ghost story, more than one. They had a lot of ghosts. Some of them had a lot of ghost stories. Some families, I think, were more sensitive to these things than others. But everybody had it, some type of experience. I had a great uncle that supposedly claimed he got in a fight with a devil on a train trestle one night, and knowing how much he drank, I'm sure he probably did. But anyway, uh, I mean, you had a lot of family stories. That's interesting. That's history. That shouldn't be lost. And it's a shame when it is.
Hmm. Reading the chat.
I was reading Penny Van's thing about all the photographs and stuff she's got. Yeah, sometimes we become the recipients of family history, whether we want to or not. It's
Well,
very good. It's very important that you pass stuff down if you can to other people. Keep it going.
well, if
Absolutely.
she can at least take pictures with her cell phone or scan them somehow, she can send them online to her cousins across to,
Yeah.
so that way you don't have to pay for shipping or anything. And then eventually maybe somebody can come get the hard copies.
Exactly, because something could happen, house fire or flood or something. They could be destroyed. It's good to have a digital record of everything, and that's not just photographs, but important papers, everything else, and put it. I've often done that and given it to other people and say, "Here, keep this for me on this desk or whatever. That's my insurance, okay?" Uh, that nothing happens to it. It's very important, especially family photographs and records. Definitely, like birth certificates, things like that, need to be digitalized without a doubt. But it's very interesting how this history, especially connects with the railroads and roads and all that, because we travel the roads all our lives. That's a part of our lives. Look how much time we spend at red stoplights waiting for the red lights to turn, green, or how much time at stop signs and parking lots that we spend in, and all this other stuff. I've even investigated a haunted parking lot one time, Geryl, that had actually supposedly, and I wrote a little story about this too, where this bag lady, I guess you call her a bag lady, or actually she didn't have a bag, she had a shopping cart, and she would, she was like a fixture in the neighborhood, and she died one night. They found her frozen to death one night, or something like that, hypothermia or whatever. On like the Christmas day, they found her dead in a parking lot. And supposedly, some people claim that you can still see this woman's shadow on the side of the building there in the parking lot pushing that shopping cart. And of course, I went and investigated this, and I did see some kind of weird shadows, but nothing I could definitely say looked like a woman pushing a shopping cart. But there was some strange noises that sounded like the squeaky wheels on the shopping cart. I don't know about that, but I did watch the shadow play on the wall from the headlights of cars on the highways and stuff. So it's a possibility that could be what somebody was seeing. But it was very interesting. That was a haunted parking lot, you know. Um, and like I said, a haunted Walmart. I had a haunted Burger King one time that I investigated. You never know where these hauntings are going to take place. Okay, and
You know,
so be ready. You have to be ready for anything.
speaking of Burger King and stuff like that, I've been reading, and Jane has also about people in fast food restaurants and places like that. They will go to the restroom or the bathroom, but they
Uh-huh.
don't come back out. So there's a story about some places have like a portal or some kind of thing that happens in these bathrooms where people go in and they disappear.
Mm. I've heard about that. Yeah, and I think one of these bathrooms is like a gas station somewhere out in Arizona, somewhere like that. Where they said that what is it, a portal or what? That people go in there and you don't see them anymore. That's it. I think one guy that was a clerk in the gas station said he heard the door open like they were coming back out, but he never saw them.
Right.
He never seen them. What happened to these people? That's very freaky stuff. So you have a lot of stuff like that going along on the roadways, byways of this country. weird stories, not just ghosts and hauntings, but weird things that happen. And, I've had some instances of lost time traveling from point A to point B that should not have been that way. And I think there's a very famous scene where I think Fox Mulder on the X Files marked a place on the highway and went down through there, and he had two stopwatches. You remember that?
Yep.
And they said, "Oh, this is not adding up. There's some kind of a time thing going on here." Um, there may be places like that. Definitely. I've had some freaky run-ins with portal activity, with magnetic fields and all that stuff. And it wouldn't surprise me if you could run into something like that on the road. And there are many stories, Gerald, of people actually supposedly crossing a bridge and never coming out on the other side.
Right.
Yeah, I know there's one very famous one that had to do with a foggy night and a covered bridge. I think it was in Pennsylvania or Maryland, someplace like that. But they went across the bridge and never came out on the other side on a foggy night or whatever it was. Was that me? And here's the interesting thing: mist a lot of times are reported. Fog and mist are reported with portal activity, so that makes you wonder about that. Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I have one story where a father and son are out on a road trip together, during the summer, and they're going to a convention or a baseball game or something. I can't really remember where they were going, but it was about time for them to fill up with their gas, or get something to eat, on the sides. And they saw a sign, the only one that was on the overpass. So they took that little road, and it ended up being a little dirt road. It wasn't even a paved road that they ended up being on. And there was a little diner there, and they stopped in, and went in, and everybody in the restaurant were kind of looking at them strange, and then they sat down, they ordered, got their food, and it was really cheap for the time, I mean, we're talking like 50s prices when here this is the 80s or 90s that they're this time period is happening. And they just thought everything was just strange, and then they finally started to notice that, everybody in the diner was dressed different than them even. So they were the oddballs coming into the restaurant. So it was, it's like a time slip kind of deal. They paid for the meal, got their gas and left. And on the way home, they thought, well, we'll stop back at that old diner. That was pretty cool. And well, when they came back going home the other way, that diner wasn't there no more.
I've heard of that story. That's very interesting. It was a time slip of some sort, where you go back in time for a little ways or something. There's another story very similar to that, Geryl, about a man and a woman that broke down on the side of the road, the old classic breaking down thing, on a stormy night. And they go to this house, and they let in the house, and they want to use the phone. The guy says, "Oh, I don't have a phone in this house," and all this stuff. And the guy's real nice to them, so they leave and go back to the car. And I think somebody comes along the road and they gets their car started again, and they say, "Well, let's go back and thank the guy, that let us in the house and all that." And they go back, and the house is a ruin. It's been, burnt down a long, long time ago. So you run into something freaky stuff like that, definitely
Yep.
on the roads. Yeah.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff, whether, and the funny thing is, they sat down at a table and they actually ate, and so that particular gas station restaurant was actually really there when they stopped.
hmm Yeah. Well, here's an interesting sideline of that. If you eat a hamburger there, did you really eat a hamburger? You know, while you were there, okay,
It'd probably be the
that would
best
be freaking.
hamburger you had in a long time.
Yeah, the spirit of a hamburger. Okay, but anyway, it's interesting though. There may be I don't think without a doubt there's certain areas on this planet where you may encounter what I call naturally occurring portals or whatever name you want to give them, where these things may happen. Without a doubt, there's been too many stories, and I had that incident happen to me one time in the woods where on a path that I knew very well turned out to be a path somewhere else altogether. And I came back along it, and it was back to where I was supposed to be. So you have to wonder. And here's an interesting thing about that. These things like that. How much of this is connected to people who actually disappear, never to be seen again? Their bodies are never found and all that. And of course, some of that might be connected to people who disappear in one area and found way off somewhere else on a mountaintop where they couldn't possibly be. How did they end up there? You go from point A to point B, passing through a portal. You might do that kind of thing.
Right.
So you got a lot of freaky stuff like that. You never know. Riding down the road in your Volkswagen one day, you may disappear and never be seen again. You may end up, who knows? God only knows what other dimension or time frame or parallel universe you might have. You
Right.
know.
I mean, there was a story the other day I heard listening to a radio show where a guy was out in the woods and hiking, and exploring, and he got to a weird part where everything started looking strange. It said he was kind of tired, sat down, took a rest, and then when he got back up to go, nothing looked right to him. The trees were different, the sky was different, everything was different. And he just wandered around for a while. Then he sat down again and did kind of the same routine that he did earlier. Then when he got up, everything was normal. He was back on his normal trail. The trees were fine. Everything was right back to where it was.
There is a haunted forest in Romania like that, Geryl, where freaky things have happened to people, and they would become very disoriented in places like that. And I think they were sitting in a circle one night in a clearing, and some of them got actually thrown out of the circle, violently thrown out. And then they said they had problems where they knew their companions well, but then began they couldn't recognize them. They look different than all that. So you have to wonder what the heck is going on with stories like that. Without a doubt, there's some type of a portal space time continuum thing going on there. It's freaky stuff, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird, and whether it's a magnetic field or a portal, like you said. I mean, all of a sudden you're just like in a time slip, or whether, like our
Uh-huh.
show, Piercing the Veil, all of a sudden you get a glimpse into another world, or you're transported, but
Sometimes, that's like I said the other day, girl. We were talking about near-death experiences and Valley of the Shadow that we talked about. When you get close to that spiritually, and there may be areas like that too, by the way. When you get close to that spirit, that certain zone, the veil gets thinner. Very thin. Okay, and I believe without a doubt you can glimpse things beyond that veil. Without a doubt, I think I've had that happen my own self. You may have too. Where that veil gets thin, and there's certain times of the year when it supposedly gets thin too. We're coming very up on one now, 31 days from now. Halloween was supposed to be a time of the veil is thinner, but there are other times too, as well. You have to wonder, this connection to time and space thing going on, and what it entails, especially when it comes to the human experience.
right.
The way we react to it. But I think it can be found in locations like roads, railroads, mountaintops, bridges, places like that. Like I said, there are areas of transition. That would be a natural place for it to happen when you think about it.
Well, you could be out there in the woods or even on a highway somewhere, and all of a sudden, you could come across one of these vortexes or where the ley lines cross and not know it. Then all of a sudden you have that magnetic field around you, which could play tricks on your mind, and everything's different for you. I mean, it's just a matter of where you're at. I mean, if that's a pretty strong force if you have cross sections of ley line hitting on each other and you just happen to walk into that area.
Oh yeah, I mean, some of these areas, some of these vortexes or portals may be traveling. They may move from area. Some of them may be permanent, you know,
Right.
or phase in and out kind of a thing. They may not be all the time there, but they phase in and out in one certain area. But some of them may move. We don't know. But that would make a lot of sense when you think about it. That you never know when you're going to run up on something like that. You can't prepare for something like that.
No.
It's like a lot of the paranormal, Geryl. Like an incident I had yesterday when I was the guy tried to run me off the road. Somebody says you should have got a picture of his tag. I said, well, I couldn't do that. I was busy trying to drive here, trying to keep from getting killed.
Trying to save my
But
life here.
if I knew it was coming, I could have been ready for it. But you never know. You never know. And that's the bad part about paranormal activity. You can never be 100% prepared for it. And that's why I've told a lot of people over the years. I've mentored a lot of groups and investigators. Always expect the unexpected, and you won't be disappointed.
You
You
know the
know.
thing about these ley lines or even these vortexes that you can come across, they start playing tricks on you because they have that low frequency. You'll start getting nauseous to your stomach. You're not feeling good. You start getting brain fog, where you can't really concentrate and sort things out.
Yeah.
You're just kind of like in a la land where, whatever these outside forces are giving you hallucinations, or, like I said, the trees were different, whether it transported you to another timeline or whatever. It could be just like the one guy said in the chat, phase and
And
elementals will do that to you
another thing,
also.
Geryl, that's your body reacting to what's going on. That frequency. That's what Tesla talked about: frequency and vibration. That's part of the secrets of the universe. And when your body starts picking up on this weird vibration of frequency that's going on, you're going to have a reaction to it. I've felt that my own self. And you're going to also not only a physical reaction, okay, it's very important, but a psychic reaction as well, a mind kind of a thing going on. Definitely, without a doubt, I have felt both of those things. And ley lines and portals, and I can't remember. I think it's the 27th parallel that runs across this country, and there's so much paranormal activity on one side of the other. And when you look at it, how many ley line crossings there are along that perimeter, then you gotta say, oh, maybe there's something earth magnetically going on here,
Right. So
some kind of earth energy.
I wanted to bring Chad's comment up because I believe that also, that the elementals and phase will play tricks on you, and they have a way of changing your perception out in the woods.
Oh yeah. Well, the fairies, if they took you into their underground kingdom, you might be there a few days and come back and you've been gone years. There's a space and a time thing going on here. I think does that not sound though like an interdimensional travel?
Yeah.
That's what that sounds like. And like I said before, we talked about heaven, hell, places beyond the veil, or whatever this. That may be another dimension per se. Without a doubt, there's something like that I think going on there. And here's the interesting thing about it. Okay, another dimension may be here with us, right here with us, but we can't see it.
Right.
It can be there, but we can't see it. It's just as real as where we're at, but we're in another dimension from it. So that's very interesting. So you don't have to go 5,000 miles to hit that dimension. It could be right here with you. You know.
Well, here's
But
the
if
other
you
thing, Dennis. I mean, once you open that door and you start to raise your consciousness or your frequency yourself, you're going to start seeing these things more and more. And it's going to be open to your eyes visually, even, and not only your
Mhm.
senses will pick it up, but you will physically and be able to see these things happening where other people won't be able to see it.
Well, that's the thing about it, Gerald, with the dimension thing. You have to see that dimension. You got to be in it. In other words, you might catch a glimpse once in a while. I'm not going to say that. But to actually experience that dimension, you must be in that dimension, or cross over into that dimension to experience it. Definitely, without a doubt. And a lot of this stuff, these freaky things that happen with hauntings on roads and bridges and tunnels and all this stuff could be connected with that, without a doubt. That you're crossing from one dimension to another. Yeah,
Yep.
makes sense. So Penny said, "I'm Scottish. I live in England, Lincolnshire. I stayed here 10 years, nothing up until a few months ago." Sometimes, Penny, places can be very quiet for years, and all of a sudden, boom, things ramp up.
Yep.
Nobody really knows why that is. There's a lot of theory and speculation on it. Did you do something? Did someone do something that precipitated this? Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't have to do anything. And all of a sudden it can be dormant. I did a very interesting investigation years ago, and all night long, I think the investigation went like 10 hours. Okay, all night long, nothing happened until the very end. Okay, then he went boom, and it was just said very. It was almost like, and I've had people describe it. Something is sitting there waiting, just waiting, to get you off guard when he wants to. And that seems to be the way some paranormal activity runs.
Well, you could have all the people living in a house, say, have a haunting or paranormal experience. Okay, they're there day in and day out, and the spirits or whatever this energy is used to those people there. So you as an investigator show up brand new to the site, whatever you're investigating, you're the weird one in there, the energy that the spirits and the people don't know. I mean, you're the new energy coming into that, so that you might not have paranormal or any kind of experience right off the bat, like you were saying. But then
Well, that's
all of a sudden things start clicking where they go, "Oh, okay, we're gonna show ourselves to this guy."
Well, that's what I talk about in my book, Beyond the Shadows. When you go into an area to investigate, you've disturbed that area. You've created waves, like waves in a pond. You know, you've disturbed that area. You need to. I don't care if you're looking for dog man or ghost or whatever your situation is you're looking for. You need to let that area calm down. Okay, and I'm talking about vibrational, psychic, and physical wise. You need to let that area calm down. Let it return back as close as possible to it was the way it was before you entered it. Before you really truly begin an investigation or hope to have any kind of comeback on that investigation. That's what you got to do. Okay, I'm sorry, it takes time. Just the boring part you never see on Ghost Hunters. Okay, as you sit there all these hours waiting for that everything to calm down, and here's almost as if, Geryl, these things are you have disturbed these things, and they're like waiting for their environment to return back to normal, and then they do their thing. You know what I'm saying? You got more of a chance that way.
Well, like I said, when you enter, say, a haunted house or a paranormal sighting place and you're investigating it, sometimes it takes a week or 2 weeks or however long you're investigating this for you to change your resonance to match what's going on, so you're able to feel or sense these things. And that's why a lot of these shows or whatever will record them. Then they'll show you the highlights of what's going on. You don't realize that it took actually 2 to 3 weeks to get all this footage, and they're showing it to you in a half-hour segment. And they all bring mediums or psychics with them on the site, because they're already at that level of consciousness and frequency to bring these spirits or paranormal to come to you. They're attracted to these people that.
But I see what you mean. That is why, Geryl, some people are more sensitive to these things than other people. They're a little more in touch with that. I think we all have that ability, but we just repress it sometimes to the point where we lose touch with it. But some people are still in touch with it, and those are the ones. And I've had a lot of people asking, "Why are these things picking on me? Why are they coming after me like this?" Well, you got to understand that's you. That's just you, and you got to learn to deal with it and handle it, because that's part of you. and that's part of your output, part of what makes you you. And you got to reconcile that. I tell them that a lot of times. Reconcile that, and you'll be a happier person for it. You know,
Right.
and understand yourself. We have to get in touch with that sides of ourselves and not repress it. If you repress, I don't care what it is. If you repress sorrow or whatever the case is, it's going to come back on you detrimentally. It's not going to be good, and you're not going to be, going to get a good output on it. It's a negative thing that you don't want to practice. So try to learn to accept yourself, to accept these things that are going on, because you got really no other choice. You can either try to repress it or push it away, or you can accept it. It's better off when you accept it, in that respect.
Well, as like you said, everybody has these gifts, and we end up repressing it. As we get older, we get tied up in life and all this stuff, so we kind of push that stuff away. I mean, how many times have you heard stories of kids or children having, a friend that nobody else can see? Your imaginary friend. Well, that's their abilities, and that's their special gifts that they're actually seeing into the piercing the veil and seeing the spirit life.
Well, we talked about that before with dogs and cats seeing things too. Uh, just because you don't see it, don't mean it ain't there. Sometimes, and we got to really understand that that is part of our universe, part of our world. Okay, part of our existence. A lot of people though, it scares them. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to mess with it. And really, you don't get a good outcome when you take that attitude to it. You really don't. And I warn people about that. It's important that you. I'm gonna tell you this, Geryl. Many years, many years ago, I was confronted with the paranormal, the supernatural, and it didn't do anything to me but want to make me know more about it. Okay, it made me begin to pursue it. But some people would not have been that way. Some people would have turned back and said, "I don't want to mess with that," and went the rest of their lives never knowing that, or repressing that, or pushing it back. I was different. I wanted to know. I wanted to go after it and understand it. But you got to realize some people don't take that attitude. Some people don't. They fight that.
The other thing is, once you open yourself up to these experiences, whether you raise your consciousness or your frequency and you're able to start getting this, you'll have all this inundate you, and just you're just like a beacon. They just come right at you. And a lot of people end up going, hysterical or crazy because they can't handle all this stuff coming at them and rushing them, all the voices and the feelings that you have the spirits upon you. And back in the old days when they didn't understand, that people could talk to spirits or see spirits, they'd lock them up in the loony bin, put them in the mental wards, put them away because they didn't understand what was going on.
Well, Gerald, that's very true. Some peoples and some cultures accept this more than others. The Irish are very interesting. The Celtic peoples are very close to this. We know without doubt the Native American peoples are very close to this, and other cultures worldwide have that connection. They accept this. But some cultures do not, especially modern day cultures. They want to repress this. Ask any scientist if he believes in ghosts, and he'll laugh you out of the room. Okay, he thinks you're stupid. You're ready for the funny farm. They because they think they have a higher intelligence than you. By the way, they think that. Now, I didn't say they did. They think that. They think they have a higher intelligence than you, so they're very antagonistic about it. They don't want to listen to you. That's why I say they wear those blinders. They can only see what they want to see. Those are the closed-minded people. You have to be open-minded, not open-minded enough so that your brain falls out. Okay, that's not good. But you do have to be open-minded and accepting of some things. Okay, and you're a better person for it. Don't walk around with blinders and seeing only what you want to see, boy, you missing out on a whole lot. And who are you hurting? Nobody but yourself, really, in the
Right.
end. That's the way that goes. Well, we're over an hour here, so I guess we can go ahead and start thinking about rounding it up here, sir.
All right. Well, like I said, I'll be on Terrence B's show tonight. The Truth Seekers. We're going to have a panel show, maybe. I don't know. He might invite a few more friends. And then Sunday at 6 p.m. Central on Midwest Night Watchers, we have George Metrovic, which is an author from Australia, and he has over 150 books on Amazon's on high strangeness, cryptids, ghost stories, all that stuff. So that's what we got going
Sounds
on.
good. Yeah, that sounds good. Now that's true. Well, I'll be, like I said, I have open mic night on Demonology today, tomorrow night at 9 o'clock with Grizzly Chris. We're going to be answering questions and just giving out observations or whatever. So come on over and join in. It's going to be interesting night. And then Wednesday night at 9 o'clock p.m., Hunting the Shadows. I'm going to definitely have an interesting show there. It's going to be zombies, voodoo, and the returning dead. So you
Then
might want to catch that one.
after your Wednesday night show, we have our Night
Yeah.
Owl Lounge show Wednesday night at 12:30 a.m., which is actually early Thursday morning for us. We'll have the normal Night Owl Lounge show. We just concentrate on the chat and just tell stories and have a good old time.
Yeah, I like to hang out in the Night Owl Lounge. Okay. You need to have one in every city there, Geryl. You need to branch out. Make a franchise.
We might have to franchise it.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone's responses today. I've been reading a lot of them. And we appreciate you being here. Remember your family. And you're always welcome. And your observations and your comments are always welcome. Oh, yeah, without a doubt. And we really appreciate you being here. Like and share us out. Hit that subscribe button. Get your friend. Tell your friends and neighbors about it, okay? Tell them that, hey, I'm listening to a great podcast. You need to check it out. It's free. It only costs nothing but your time, okay? And so check us out on all our different shows and all the things we got going on. We always have. I'll tell you one thing. I can promise you, okay? You will never be bored, okay? We will never bore you, okay? Without a doubt. And that's one thing we can hold up on that. So we really appreciate you being here. And tomorrow morning, we'll see what else we get into on Sunday morning, Paranormal Weekend Brew at 10:30. And maybe Mr. Nighthawk will put in an appearance. If we all wish hard enough, we can get him back here, okay?
Yep.
And appreciate you co-hosting here, or both of us co-hosting, I guess you might say. Geryl, appreciate your input, sir.
Yep. Glad to be here. Love talking to you every time, Dennis.
All right. And so we say goodbye to everybody out there. Hope you have a good day today and the rest of the weekend. Behave yourselves. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. If you do, don't get caught. Okay.
Yep.
And until next time.
Yep. Love and peace. Be kind to others, everybody.
Bye, con Dios.